Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today we're going to be taking a look at the deck that I like to call Beast, and I named it that because it is definitely a beast of a deck. You will not see a deck quite like this one. I've been playing this for about a month and a half now. I haven't seen any decks on this level. I have about a 77% win ratio, maybe a little bit lower now, 75%. I've played a lot of games with it. I have a lot of time with this deck. This is my main deck that I use for ranked. My cousin actually walked me through each and every card, showing me which one I need, which one I need to discard. And like I said, it's worked out well for the both of us, so I'll just take us in it right now. So we're going to start off with the 3 Solano Harpies. They just recently got a nerf. They used to be 4 points, now they're only 3. I mean, not huge, but still makes a little bit of a difference. Then we're going to have 3 Wild Hunt Hounds. These are great to have in your deck, especially for playing monsters. You have to rely heavily on weather, so these cards are great. Then, moving on to the Arch Griffins. We're going to have 2 Arch Griffins because we're going to be a little bit weak when it comes to clearing weather. We're only going to have 1 First Light, but we'll get to that later. So these will help clear all the weather from any of the rows that you play them on, which is handy. I've seen weather be played a lot lately, especially after their recent buff. So it's kind of a necessity to carry them. And plus they give you the nice 7 points. Not a bad card to have. Then we're moving on to the Drowner. We'll take 2 Drowners, both 8 points each. They recently got a buff. They used to be 7 points. So they're good to, let's say they play a card out of the weather that you have, instead of them clearing the weather. Even if they have a First Light, they don't want to burn that right off the bat. They'll play it into a row that doesn't have ice on it. You can use that Drowner to move the enemy card into the ice, which is great. You'll have 2 of those. Most of the time you'll have 1 in your deck. Maybe later on you'll pick up 2. But they're really handy to have. Plus, same goes for your troops. If you have a card that's in any sort of weather, you can move them out on your side. So it's really great to have that. Also, I'll explain a little bit more when we get later on. These guys are very, very useful in the deck. So next we have Fiend. This is a silver card. It will half the enemy's health completely, disregarding armor, everything like that. Great card to have. It also toggles a lock on the card, which basically, let's say they have resilience, and that means, I mean, I'm sure you guys know, but if the resilience is played on a card, they'll be staying to the next round, and nobody likes to start out a round with an enemy card on the board, so that'll stop that from happening. Now moving on to the legendaries, we have Igni. This is a great card. I see it get used a lot nowadays. Igni is great when if the enemy has 20 or more power on one row. A lot of the time, if I'm playing either Northern Realms or Nilfgaard, they'll have similar cards with the exact same power on one row. This will burn every single one of those cards and get rid of them all. So I've gotten rid of like over 25 points just from this one card by burning them. And also, let's say the enemy has 17 points. This is where the Drowners come in. 17 points on one row. You can move one of their other cards that they're not on that row to get you over that 20 threshold that you would need in order to play Igni. So that's why Drowner is a great card to have. Multiple situations where you could use them in. Moving on to Triss. Triss is a pretty generic card. I see it be used a lot. What I like to use Triss for is getting rid of the Rot Tossers, anything like that, or maybe just quickly ending one of those trebuchets if it's low health and it's got a few points left, or 5 points left. I'll use her to get rid of it, or just get rid of the Rot Tossers. That'll save my row. Sometimes a Rot Tosser could completely change the game around, and Triss helps out with that. Not the best card, probably could switch her out for something else, but right now it seems to be working pretty fine for me. Moving on, we have Imlerith. I don't know how to pronounce that one. Imlerith. That's it, I think. If I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll be corrected. What he does, I think he got a recent buff, and not this patch, but the last patch. I could be mistaken though, I could be wrong. But he starts off with the 8 power. What he does, especially since you're bringing 3 for us and 3 Wild Hunts, he'll damage an enemy by 4, but if they're under ice, by 8. So that's a great card right there. Good value. Corinthia. This card recently got a nerf slash buff. He used to be able to move 5 cards and deploy Biting Frost. And now he has 9 points instead of the 5, and you can only move 3. So it's still a really handy card to have. And what I like about this card is, let's say you used all of your Biting Frost and you still have him. You can play him and he spawns a Biting Frost, so that gives you that additional Biting Frost that you wouldn't have had previously. Next card, Wyvern. Nothing too special here. You just have the 6 points and it just damages an enemy by 3. Those 3 points sometimes come in handy. I've won games where I would have lost if I didn't have Wyvern, so good pick. Nothing too amazing. Good bronze card. Now these 3, these are the amazing ones. This whole deck they're like the 1-2 punch. Like you pull out one, it's game over. What I like to do is save them to the very last round as best as I can. Keep 2 in your deck, not in your hand, because there's no point. It's just a waste of a card. And you pull them out. The enemy player, the opponent, has no idea how to counter it. Usually they're down to their final few cards, and they see them. Once I pull them out, I usually get your opponent has forfeited. That's what happens more often than not. Moving on, we have the Biting Frost. You know, those you never keep in your hand. You keep those in your deck, because why would you keep them in your hand when you have the 3 wild hunts? And then we're going to bring 1 First Light. Also, you could use this as a rally if you wanted to, but I like to save the rally cards if I don't need the First Light until after I play the Crones, because you have that possibility of pulling out one of the Crones, and then it's basically like you just wasted the card, and then you don't have that awesome double pull out of your deck, which everybody loves to see. Now the Commander's Horn. This is the real 1-2 punch here. If you have the Crones and then you have the Commander's Horn, play that with a couple of cards next to them, and there's just no coming back from that. There's absolutely no coming back from that if you're an opponent, especially if they see, if it's later in the game, they see that Commander's Horn get pulled out with the Crones. You're not getting a good game. I'm sorry. It's one of those decks. People don't like losing to that. So then the final card is the Frightener. This one, I don't see it get played almost ever. Maybe I have to move higher up, or maybe it's just not a popular card. I mean, I could see why it's not. It does give the opponent 10, but what it does do is allow you to draw an additional card. Since this deck is heavily based around building, winning that first round very strongly, you got to play it out as best as you can. There are certain circumstances where you'll obviously give up the first round if you see your opponent overextending and you think you could win the second and third round. Then I've won many games like that as well. You just have to know when to give up and not push your limits. And I'll throw him in, the Frightener, in the second round when let's say I played a couple of Selena Harpies and their eggs have hatched into that second round. Usually I'll start off with like at least 6 points, sometimes 9 points, depending on, you know, if they destroyed 1 or 2, you know, sometimes 12. You know how it works. If you have the eggs, they're already at a disadvantage. You play the Frightener to pick up an additional card. Pray to God it's not one of the Crones, and then they'll still have to play an additional card. Then you just give that round up completely. This deck is built around winning the first deck and the first round, and then the third round. That, I'd say about 90% of my wins are first and third round wins. So they're going to be quite long games, but not too long. And yeah, this Frightener is just to pick up another card in your hand, so it does come in handy. So that's basically the entire deck. The leader is Eredin. Once again, you could play the Wild Hunt Hound, which is great if you haven't drawn one yet, and sometimes you only get stuck with one or none. And he's great for either doing that, or let's say you have one in your hand, he gives you the ability to spawn the Wild Hunt Navigator, which gives you an additional 3 points. And you could also spawn, if you have on the board, another Wild Hunt Hound. So it's a very, very good card to have as this leader. I see this leader a good amount, but not as much as I see, I think it's Unseen Elder. I've seen that one a lot recently. But alright guys, that's pretty much it. That's the basics of the deck. If you guys have any questions or suggestions about this deck, let me know. I'm more than willing to swap out some cards, try some new things. And if you want me to make a video on how I personally use the deck in an actual, ranked match, I'd be more than willing to do that, try it out, show you guys a little bit more in depth some of the techniques I use. But alright, yeah, that's all the basics that you need. Hope you guys liked it. Take it easy.